Regional Council, and good morning, Council, to our audience and staff as well. And remember, those of you who are around the table, please turn on your mics before speaking. And for those who are participating by Zoom, please state your name when you're making a comment so that we know who you are. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items that fall under our jurisdiction. And if you would like to comment at today's meeting, please complete a request to speak form. MAG staff can help you with any questions you have. If you parked in the garage, I feel we all park in the garage and know this, but I'm required to say it. Parking validators are available on the information table in the foyer. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing devices are also available from staff, and we will now start our meeting with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Regional Council. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Mayor Beck, Mayor Bian Wilner, Mayor Crane.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
Thank you.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego.
Not me.
Supervisor Galvin. Mayor Giles. Supervisor Goodman.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mayor Harkey.
Here.
Thank you. President Javier.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hermosillo.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Lavalde.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Governor Roe Lewis. Mr. Mack.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Molina. Mayor Morris. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you.
Oh.
Mayor Ortega.
Present.
Thank you. President Patia.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pizzillo.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Rodriguez. Mayor Schultz.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Sykes.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Walter.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wheatley.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson. Mayor Woods. Is there anyone that I missed?
This is Jerry Bian Wilner. I'm here. I'm sorry, my mic wasn't working. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Caught you before that.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, staff. Our next item is call to the audience. So prior to the first item of business, we would welcome our newest member, President Sandra Patia. President Patia is newly elected to lead the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. And I believe, President Patia, you're online with us?
Yes, I am.
Well, welcome to MAG Regional Council, and thank you for committing to serve your community and being part of MAG.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the invite to attend. This is just my third week actually, starting in my new position. Just a little bit about me. I am a nurse with a master's from ASU. I worked with the Indian Health Service and actually retired from federal service after 33 years. I am a Rear Admiral in the United States Public Health Service, retired. And now I'm here serving my home, and it's a pleasure to be able to meet with all of you. And one day maybe we will meet in person. I'll go there for a meeting. So thank you for your time.
Well, we look forward to meeting you live, and you seem more qualified probably than any of us here today. So
No, I don't believe so. I'll be learning from you. Thank you.
all right, next is opportunity for public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, information items or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes have been provided for call to the audience, and I understand that we have one person, Diane Barker. Diane, I think you know the drill with the lights, and so welcome.
Good morning. Mayor Harkey and MAG Regional Council. I'm Diane Barker, and I believe in multimodal transportation. I got my bus pass. I'm sorry, I apologize for my phone going off. I typically try to really make sure that it is off, but I do have a good story for you about the transit system. I like to tell a story in case some of you don't know too much about the transit or use it. I had told you the negative story. I never got my bicycle back of the guy that was wanting to help me put it on, and he helped me, and then he got off at a stop before me and took my bicycle. Well, the system, I filed complaints in transit and police department, but apparently that's low-lying fruit, because even though I followed up after I filed the complaints, nothing has come back to me. However, the good story is I took the light rail. I went back to Metro Center to see, what they had done with the light rail. And then I went over to Joyce Meyer. She's a pastor, and she was at the Dream Church, which I'd never been, which is up on Sunny Slope. And it was marvelous. She had a new twist in letting you know that you want a good life, it's up to you. And the glass is half full rather than empty. So now I come back and it's 10:30 and it's very busy transit center at Sunny Slope. And so now I see the Zero bus and I'm wanting to get back home downtown Phoenix. And so I want to get on that. And so I'm rushing, and I did make it. But then when I get home, I have no phone. And this phone happens to be something that Verizon even like to have, because I take pictures as good. Anyway, would you believe I went to Verizon, turn off the service. They took the SIM card out, which messed up like the configuration. Anyway, I went through a lot of stuff. On Monday, I went to transit and they said, let's see. I've got to, Iris says, put a little juice in. He said, yes, it's your picture. Here's your phone. And everybody told me I wasn't going to get it back. So yay, that is a plus for transit. And there were other things I wanted to share with you, community input. Mr. Crawley, who has been here, is saying that we need to make sure that when everything is multimodal, that the streets in Lynchfield, if you're going to make the extensions, you got to marry the bus stops with it too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Ms. Barker, it sounds like transit was batting 500 for you. So I also understand at our days here, people who had submitted written comments via the MAG website, the comments are here and also had been submitted to us before this meeting. Our next item is item number 4, informational items. Items 4A through 4B are for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Seeing none in the room, hearing none online. Our next agenda item is item number 5, which is the consent agenda. Items 5A through 5F are on the consent. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation for any of these items? Seeing none in the room, seeing no responses online. Okay, we do have opportunity for the people in the audience to also speak, so hang on to that movement. And second, we do have a speaker from the public again, Ms. Barker.
Thank you again, Mayor Harkey. On the minutes, I've gone through a lot of information that I've received from you in the last several years. And so I'm going to make a smorgasbord, of comments that relate to these minutes because they're talking about federal highway. They also are talking about its boilerplate on the Civil Rights Act of '6 that you need to go on, and also environmental justice. I'm very interested in that because, I do use transit. Transit serves a whole myriad of population. And there look like some pretty heavyweights that are going to the D-backs game, so it's just not all the poor people that it said need to take transit. These systems that are built for the general public. And I use it, and I've survived, gone all over the valley on it. Okay. And basically, I know how to carry myself, and I took Taekwondo. So if I've had some people approach me, too close, and I've asked them to stay away. And so the thing about it is that we need to look at our systems. And then if you're afraid to have your daughters ride it or whatever, teach yourself defense. That you walk with a purpose. You can go any place. I've gone all over the valley. So I wanted to share that. And also that the federal highway program that you have, again, it needs to be married with the multimodal system. I see that intersections are a big thing. I'm very much for safety. I was a bus driver, and the number one thing we were taught was safety. If it's not safe, you don't do it. This was back in the day before we really had cell phones and the smartphones. But we were taught you do not use your phone, period, when you are in that seat driving. And then it took years later for us to make that law. So what I'm trying to say is all of our systems, we need to look across the whole valley and see where we have safety problems, intersections. And MAG should be concerned then to forego some of their projects in order for safety. That is number one in this whole system. And, I'm big on customer service. I think that the light rail system, it has its problems, but part of it is the way we approach people. It would be nice if we could help people transfer rather than tell them, no ticket, you got to get off and you're in handcuffs.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. We have not received any written online comments for the consent agenda or any other item on today's agenda.
Okay, very good. I believe now is the time for a motion. I heard one on my left. Do you want to repeat that? As moved and second. Very good. We have a motion from Mayor Wires and a second from Mayor Arteaga. We will have those participating in the meeting online take place by the voice vote by turning on your camera, unmuting your audio, and rapidly scrambling right now to do the same. We do need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. For those who cannot do so or for whatever reason, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who did not turn on their cameras. So members, please leave your cameras on till after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those who are online? Those who are in favor, say aye.
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 And those who are opposed? All right, we have no audible ones. Do we need to follow up with voice or with call-outs? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. When I call your name, please indicate. Mayor Hall,
Aye.
thank you. That is everyone. And Mr. Vice Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, council. Our next item before us is item number 6, Prop 479 Implementation Overview and Roadmap. A familiar face, John Boland, our Chief Transportation Office. Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, members of Regional Council. Happy to be here today and to upcoming efforts we have really to get prepared for the implementation of Proposition 479. So to start, just to give a brief overview of how we've ended up here, where we've ended up after more than 3 years of intense discussion, public engagement, deliberation, technical analysis, and ultimately compromise. This body, the MAG Regional Council, approved our Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, or RSTIP for short, back in June of 2021. The RSTIP was then updated with conforming changes to state legislation, enabling a vote to extend Prop 400, known as Prop 479, back in September. And just as a reminder, the RSTIP itself serves as the basis, the guide for investments funded through the extension of Maricopa County's dedicated half-cent sales tax, Proposition 479. So Proposition 479, the RSTIP, the investment plan, contains a number of defined projects. Those projects range from freeway and highway improvements, whether that be construction of State Route 30 in the Southwest Valley, completion of Loop 303, the Loop 3 I-17 system interchange, completion of State Route 24. It also includes a number of arterial improvements throughout the region, as well as high-capacity transit improvements, as defined by this map. The RSTIP also includes funding set aside for programs. Programs are the region's way to respond to an uncertain future. So rather than go through the process of trying to identify 20 years worth of very specific projects, we instead set aside funding and then we'll competitively select those projects on a periodic basis. Program funding ranges from additional arterial improvements to safety improvements to investments in signal technology and emerging technology, as you see on the screen. So where are we at in terms of time? Well, we stand here today. We're just at the end of February 2024, looking forward to the Proposition 479 ballot initiative that will be placed on Maricopa County voters' ballots this November. The current sales tax proposition authorized through Proposition 400 by Maricopa County voters back in 2004 is set to end on December 31st, 2025. And with a successful approval of Proposition 479, that dedicated half-cent sales tax would continue on January 1st, 2026 for a duration of 20 years. So while 2 years in the future seems like a long time when it comes to particularly capital infrastructure as well as transit service, that is not a lot of time. We have a lot of work to do. We need to start getting the framework set up to be able to effectively manage and implement these projects that we identified as part of the comprehensive plan. So today, I want to talk through what some of those future efforts will be. Just as a reminder, a bit of a primer for the RSTIP and how it was developed or constructed. We focus a lot on the dedicated half-cent sales tax as a funding source that represents approximately half of the funding needed to deliver these very important regional investments, but it's not the only funding source that we consider. We also took into account some of the FHWA and FTA formula funds that are available to the region, as well as a portion of the HERF available to the region for freeway and highway investments. So what we did is we put all that funding on the table and we put it into the RSTIP. And the RSTIP, of course, is our overall comprehensive plan for managing that funding and allocating it. When it comes to actual implementation, that occurs through other mechanisms, what we call management tools. Of course, we have the freeway program or freeway lifecycle program managed here at MAG, but implemented by our partners at ADOT. The transit lifecycle program, which is currently managed at Valley Metro and implemented by Valley Metro and our member agencies. and the arterial program, which is managed by or implemented by member agencies, excuse me. And then, of course, we have competitive programs, which are also implemented by member agencies. So looking forward, what I want to do is walk through each of these with some of the efforts that we have and talk about how it impacts you and really when to expect some of the big decision points coming up. I'll start first with the freeway program. So we have a defined freeway program in place, the Prop 400 freeway program. We already know what projects are going to be funded out of that. We know what projects are coming up, whether that's the Loop 101 widening through Scottsdale that's on the way now, to the future extension of Loop 303 through Goodyear. These projects are already defined, sequence, and get updated every year. We fund these projects much like we will in the future through a combination of funding streams, not just the dedicated half-cent sales tax, but also some of the other revenues available. And as we look forward, as we look to the transition between the Prop 400 and the Prop 479 freeway program, this will be the easiest of the three programs to transition. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, we've been at this a long time. If you recall, the dedicated half-cent sales tax was first approved back in 1985. It was the funding source to build the region's freeway system. So we've been partnering with ADOT. Roles and responsibilities are clearly known, how we get these projects developed, how we implement them. It's more of the same as we look forward. And I just want to emphasize there our partnership with ADOT, who really has done a terrific job of being partners with the region in delivering some of this critical infrastructure. It's also a bit easier because we've already had previous approval to initiate some of the efforts for phase one projects, whether that's State Route 24 in the Southeast Valley, where we have final design that will soon begin, to State Route 30, where we have right-of-way acquisition underway, we have final design about to start, or the 303 at I-17 system interchange that's under final design now. So we've already started some of the development efforts. So as we look forward, we'll be able to hit the windows for construction that we need to hit to get these projects out the door as quickly as possible. Doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of work yet to do, however. One of the first tasks that we need to do is we need to go through the process of updating all our revenue estimates. In some cases, it's pretty straightforward because we have built-in processes to come up with our dedicated sales tax revenue estimates that we update every year. In other instances, like some of our federal funding, it's a little bit harder because we're trying to project what the federal government's going to do between now and 2045. That presents a challenge that we've been at this for a while. We also have to go through the process of updating project costs. You've seen this in all your local agencies. Project costs have gone up significantly. So we need to calculate what those cost increases are, take them into account. In some cases, we've done some study work that have matured the concepts or evolved the concepts from when we put the plan together in 2020. A good example is the presentation you heard on improvements to the I-10 between the tunnel and the split. So we're going through a planning study. At the end of that planning study, we'll know the exact improvements that we need to put forward for further development in the process. And then finally, once we have the updated revenue and costs, we'll have to develop a specific implementation schedule for the first couple of phases. So this is a particularly important step. So this is actually nailing down to exactly when those projects will go to construction. So as part of the investment plan, we have them identified in 5-year increments, phase 1, phase 2. This will be the exercise of saying project X will go to construction in 2026 versus project Y will go to construction in 2028. And of course, this is all highly dependent on some of the earlier steps. So we're really going to start to initiate some of these efforts after we conclude the fiscal year 2025 freeway program update, which will be considered by this body in May of this year. And so this will be a big lift between MAG and ADOT over the summer, and we'll be able to take additional information to you all come next fall. Looking at the arterial program, so again, similar to the freeway program, we know what projects are in the current Prop 400 arterial program. We know what those projects are that are supposed to be delivered between now and 2026. And those projects are funded through a combination of the half-cent sales tax as well as some of the federal formulas. Where we differ a little bit from the freeway program, however, is we have to figure out what we want to do at the end of the arterial program. So the arterial program is a reimbursement program. In this instance, your cities are out there building the projects now, and you wait for reimbursement to come back to the region. So some of these projects aren't going to get started until construction until 2026. So of course, we're going to incur expenditures in 26, 27, 28. So how long do we want to leave that funding available for projects to get out the door? Those are just some of the policies that we'll have to wrestle with between now and the time that we start to develop the Prop 479 arterial program.
And just to add on this, so I think the arterial program is the one that's probably most personally affects you as mayors and your city managers, because you're the ones doing it. With the freeway, it's ADOT. With transit, it's Valley Metro or Phoenix, depending on who's implementing it. But this is one where we're really going to want to dig in with your staff on this, because you're directly tapping into these funds here on the arterial program and then on the programs that come later.
Exactly. And so some of the efforts looking forward that we have will be of particular interest to your staffs. The first thing we need to do is we have to develop the policies for the Prop 479 ALCP. So this is another area where it differs a little bit from the freeway program. And that's because these policies guide a number of things, whether that ranges from how to handle the reimbursements amounts, what's eligible for reimbursement, what's not eligible for reimbursement. We're working off a good set of policies in the Prop 400 ALCP. We have a lot to work with, but the number of member agencies that have projects in the Prop 479 ALCP is significantly higher than the Prop 400. So we want to make sure that it's an inclusive process. There's opportunity for everybody to understand how it works, and we start to develop those policies. Once that's done, we can go through a similar exercise as we do in the freeway program, where we're updating the revenue estimates. We'll update the regional funding amounts, consider the impact of inflation, and then we'll get to the final step in the process, which is a specific sequencing. And again, this is another area that will be of particular interest to you and your staffs, because this will determine whether or not a project gets reimbursed in fiscal year 2026 or a project gets reimbursed in fiscal year 2030, both of which are phase one, but there's a big difference between those 2 years. So what we'll do is we'll work with your staffs to start to wrestle through some of these technical issues, start to put together some ideas. Once those ideas have been vetted, we'll bring that through the policy committee process for further consideration, further discussion. As I had mentioned, really the sequence is let's figure out what first to do with the Prop 400 ALCP. Then we'll start working on the Prop 479 ALCP policies, and then we'll take the program and specific sequencing forward for discussion to you all. And then the final life cycle program, the TLCP. So the TLCP is a little different than the other two because it's not just capital projects. It also contains funding for ongoing operations. So it's very important because it impacts bus service that's currently on the street today. So we already know what the defined capital improvements as part of the existing Prop 400 TLCP are. We also know what service is funded. But when we look towards the future, when we look towards Prop 479, this is the program that has the biggest policy shifts between what we've done in the past and where we're going in the future, really underscored by our transition to a performance-based formula for operating assistance. Also, Valley Metro currently manages the TLCP as part of the Prop 479 program in our comprehensive funding management that will transition to MAG. So some of the work ahead, it's similar to the other programs, but then there's some nuances that are much more complex. First thing, we're going to have to initiate some of these study efforts, really to help guide and help establish the parameters for the future transit program and to facilitate some of that transition between where we are today and where we want to go in the future. Of course, we have to update the revenue estimates, much like we do the other programs. We have to document all the different funding assumptions, all the sources. And then for the high capacity transit program, very similar to the freeway program and arterial program, where we'll have to go through the exercise of figuring out specific phasing. So we'll be working very closely with our partners at Valley Metro, as well as member agency staff over the coming months to start getting that work underway. And eventually we'll be taking elements through the policy committee process later this fall and into next year. And then the last category that I want to touch on real quick is competitive programs. So again, this is the funding set aside where we don't have defined projects, but we're going to go through a process to figure out what those projects are. Just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, the amount of funding set aside from programs, if you compare Prop 479 to Prop 400 today, it's significantly more. So there's a lot of opportunity. So even if you don't have an arterial project in the ALCP, doesn't mean that there won't be an opportunity for you in the future. So these are very important. The other thing we did too is we expanded the fund sourcing. So it's not just federal funds. We're also using sales tax funds. And that was one of our strategies to make our dollars go further. Depending on the project size, we can save between 20 and 50% if we don't federalize a project. So this was one of the underpinnings of our future plan. So looking ahead, really where we need to give priority are on those two programs that are fully funded through federal resources. Federal resources are use or lose. That means we have to find a home for them or the region loses them. We've never lost any funding. We never want to lose any funding. So we want to make sure that we start to develop things. And that's the arterial rehabilitation. So that's local roadway reconstruction projects, as well as arterial widening. So that's widening existing arterial streets. That's building new arterial streets. So we're going to quickly pull together a work group of member agencies again to start working through some of the technical elements. We're going to bring those policies through the committee process. And ultimately, what we want to do is set it up for a call for projects this fall. What that means to you all is that come this fall, there will be an opportunity to fund some of your future arterial projects in 2026, 2027, and 2028. So that's on the near-term horizon. For some of the other programs, we have some study work we need to do, whether that's some of the non-motorized infrastructure funding we have set aside, whether that's some of the ITS funding that we have set aside. We need to initiate updates to some of our regional studies to really help guide where those investments are going to go. So we're going to get that effort kicked off this summer. And then one of the other big topics that we'll be discussing are policy conversations on safety. Unfortunately, this region, when you look at various safety metrics, we have challenges, and we're going to need to decide how we want to go about tackling some of those challenges, how we can build opportunities into some of these competitive programs so that we can start to improve some of our safety statistics. So with that, Mr. Chairman, a lot of work ahead, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Mayor Weiss?
John, you talk about the project sequencing for arterial life cycle.
Yeah.
And we've touched on we have background history on Prop 400, how we did it then. I know there's a bigger pool of money, but how much will we rely on? How much can cities rely on past history for that sequencing? And I guess I'm getting at, we sequence projects. There's certain things that change, and a project may get moved up or moved down.
Yeah.
Do you see that drastically changing in 479?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Wise, great question. So, part of what I think we need to tackle too is there were projects that were identified by local agencies back in 2020, 2021 that were high priorities. And in some cases, development has come through and built them. In other cases, the strain on the local traffic network has necessitated city councils allocating money to hurry up, rush through, and build those projects. So there's going to be instances where, okay, instead of doing this 1 mile of roadway, we need to look at doing a different 1 mile of roadway. So that factors into some of the policy conversations about what the mechanism is to go about and figure out how we change from A to B, what the logic, what the process is, and of course, build in plenty of opportunity for technical analysis, public discussion, and build that process. In terms of the sequencing itself too, what we found with the Prop 400 ALCP is there's a lot of demand early on. A lot of folks are ready, have projects ready, rearing to go. In some cases, they'll go out and they'll build them and they'll patiently wait for the reimbursement to come in. I anticipate that's probably going to be the case with the Prop 479 ALCP. Demand will outweigh the amount of money available in the near term. And so there's going to have to be a prioritization effort that takes place at local agencies, whether or not to front that money, whether to wait for the regional funding. And then, of course, putting in policies in place where if we have available funding, we can accelerate that to try and get more infrastructure out the door quickly. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And it goes to my final point is when we sold Prop 400, now 479 to the legislature and to the governor, and we did our public outreach, we talked about building in flexibility into this system and not having silos. Can you just kind of touch on how that flexibility will differ 479 from 400?
Yep, you bet. Mr. Chairman, Mayor Weiss. So when we talk about the RSTIP and we talk about the different funding sources that come in and the allocation, whether that be to the arterial program and some of these competitive programs, that will really give us the ability. I think the best example is emerging technologies. We set aside money for emerging technologies because we wanted this region to be in a position with a future technology that comes along that we don't know what it is today, but we can be first in line to respond, react, and implement that. Well, it's unlikely that a new emerging technology is going to be in place in 2026, for example. And so there will be an opportunity to maybe we hold back that emerging technologies money for 10 years and we advance some of it to be available for some of these arterial construction projects so that cities can get those out the door quicker. So that's an example of some of the push-pull flexibility that we have to really maximize every dollar in the program.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any additional questions? I assume pretty soon we'll be having some conversations just about the 479 process, and as we did in the past in marketing, et cetera. Would you care to address any of that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council, in terms of framework development, or were you thinking something
No,
else?
more on the getting it passed, that process.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Any campaigning for 479, of course, will happen outside of this setting, because as public agency, we are mindful of the law and the rules about campaigning. I think there have been conversations that I understand have been taking place, but what our focus on in MAG will be presenting the information about what is in it.
Yeah.
As we've said from the beginning, you all have said very clearly, the program really sells itself and people intuitively understand the benefits of good transportation. Our focus is on being really clear for everyone about what is in the program, what projects are there, and then making that available for you all in your roles to take that forward as you're doing your work.
And Mr. Chair, I think Mayor Wires we had that kickoff yesterday. Do you want to touch on that? Just kind of, I think it goes directly to your point of what does that look like? And if you're just being comfortable with this conversation, I want to make sure.
Yeah, I can't say a whole lot just because it is a campaign. What I can tell you is everybody refers to it as 479, and they desperately want everybody to call it 479. So for whatever that's worth, at any rate, no, it was a good event yesterday. We had a lot of people showed up. The governor and I think most every mayor in Maricopa County to announce what we're doing, and I really can't say a whole lot right now. That's the problem. But no, I think it was good. I think it was good turnout. And not that I'm looking for another campaign, but yeah, here we go again.
And I should have said information rather than marketing, so
Sure.
That was a misspeak.
Just one thing I'd emphasize here is for us, there's a couple principles that we're taking as staff, which is one, no agency left behind, in that we want to be sure that we are including all member agencies in the development of the programs, so that regardless of size or capacity, your agencies understand what is in the program for you and how to access that. The second one would be there's no black box here, which is the development, as John's talking about. We want to do that in cooperation with your city managers, your transportation experts, the transit folks, so that everyone understands clearly what the rules of engagement are, because that's going to be really important 3, 5, 10, 12 years from now, after many of us have probably gone to do other things. That how do we get to this money? So we understand the rules are clear, and that that it can be equally available to all our members. So we're going to work really hard with your managers and your staffs to make sure that that's a constant touch point with us and them.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Thank you, John.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is EPA final rule revising the national ambient air quality standard for fine particulates. This item is on for information and discussion and will be presented by Matt Poppin, Interim Environmental Director. Sir.
And Mayor, I'll just introduce again, I think the last time we had an air quality presentation, we had Tim Franquist was our environmental director. You guys are familiar with Tim. Tim has taken a job with the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he's helping them on the private sector side understand air quality, which is good for our private sector colleagues to have that level of expertise. Matt has been with us at MAG for a long time, worked in air quality, has a lot of expertise, and he has stepped into that role while we're recruiting for a permanent position. And so he's done a great job in the last month and a half of being responsible for that. And so we want to just bring you up to date on another air quality issue that's coming our way here in the region with a national rule that's been made. So with that, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Regional Council. We are going to be presenting today on EPA's latest air quality standard. So on February 7th, EPA revised their national ambient air quality standard for fine particulates, what we call PM 2.5. As you can see in the graphic, it kind of shows that the fine particulates are the very smallest ones that EPA sets a standard for. The graphic is a human hair, so you can see the size of the particulate in relation to a human hair. So these are very, very small particles that can lodge in your lung very easily. So what EPA has done is they have strengthened the annual standard from the prior level of 12 down to a new level of 9. So it's quite a strict change. So within our region, within Maricopa County, we currently have 3 monitors that are violating this new PM 2.5 standard. As you can see on the map, we have West Phoenix as our highest monitor at 10.5 versus the new annual standard of 9. Durango Complex is at 10.2 and South Phoenix is at 10.4. The other monitors in Maricopa County are currently attaining the standard. This is based off of 2022 data. We do have preliminarily 2023 data available as well. Those values are a little bit lower, but we're still violating the standard at those 3 monitors. Within Pinal County, we have 1 monitor that is violating the standard. This is the Hidden Valley monitor at 12.4. The other 2 monitors currently meet this new standard. So the sources, what causes PM 2.5? Within our region, there are primarily 2 categories of sources that contribute to PM 2.5. The first is just any combustion activity. So fires, exhaust from vehicles, engines, boilers, any type of industrial process that has a smokestack associated with it is going to produce PM 2.5. And then any activity that disturbs our desert soils. So driving on unpaved roads, earth moving, construction activity, agricultural activities, all of those can contribute to the formation of PM 2.5. It's also really important to point out for our area that in the wintertime, we have really large spikes in PM 2.5 associated with residential wood burning and with consumer fireworks activity. Just to give you one example, January 1st of this year, the reading for PM 2.5 was 180 micrograms at the West Phoenix monitor, which is almost 20 times over the standard. So when you have a day like that, you have to have almost 20 days of 0 to get back to that annual standard of 9. So those spikes can really impact our position in regards to the annual standard.
And Matt, just maybe state the obvious, but what was going on January 1st that would have made PM 2.5 that elevated?
Right. So as many of you probably are aware of, it's the consumer fireworks activity that really contributes the most. And weather is against us. When we have those calm days with that inversion effect, it just traps that pollution. I'm sure many of you you look at the street light right in your neighborhood and you can just see it floating there. That's PM 2.5 that's being trapped, and that just increases the concentration. That, along with the residential wood burning, the fire pits, all of that contributes to very high values. That, in comparison to like our spring and summer season, our average is about 7 for the PM 2.5. So there's a really big difference. It's not a constant. We have very seasonal variation in PM 2.5. So a couple important implementation timeline dates I want to make you aware of. The first is within 1 year of EPA promulgating this new rule, the state has to come up with recommendations to EPA on what areas should be classified as attaining the standard and what areas should be classified as not attaining the standard, or what we call a new non-attainment area. So the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality is responsible for this activity. So they will be initially developing the recommendations. They will give those recommendations to the governor, and then the governor submits those to EPA for consideration. ADEQ's process is part of a public process, so there will be opportunity to comment on those boundary recommendations. And then a year after that, EPA actually has to come out with their initial attainment, non-attainment area designations. So we won't know what areas in Arizona will be a new non-attainment area for at least another 2 years. And EPA will most likely base those new designations based on data from 2022 through 2024. It's a 3-year average. So this year's data will be included. Hopefully this year's data is lower. Maybe one of those monitors will fall out, but that will be ultimately what EPA will choose when they make their recommendations or their designations. So just briefly, if there are any new non-attainment areas, they will be classified as a moderate. With particulate matter, there's only 2 categories, moderate and serious. I know we've talked about ozone before, where there's a lot of categories. There's just 2 with particulate matter. And most likely the attainment date when we would have to come into compliance with that will be 2032. They give you 6 years to try and demonstrate attainment initially. Once EPA designates an area, MAG will have 18 months to prepare an air quality plan that shows attainment with this new standard. And just briefly, some of the major items that will be in this air quality plan will be a new emissions inventory. That's really critical. That will help us determine what sources are really contributing to the PM 2.5 issue. There has to be an evaluation of control measures, what are reasonable, what the area could adopt to help attain the standard. There has to be a demonstration of how you would attain that standard. And then if you don't make it, the plan has to include contingency measures that would come into effect right away if you fail to meet the standard by that attainment date. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Matt, could you just describe a bit what's the relationship going to be between, if you go back one slide, what's the work you and your staff are going to have to do here at MAG? And then what's the relationship between Pinal County Air Quality and Maricopa County Air Quality staffs in this?
Right. So as the regional planning agency, we're responsible for getting the plan ready for submission to EPA, and that plan will come to regional council for adoption. So what we do is we work with Maricopa County and Pinal County in developing the emissions inventory. MAG is responsible for developing emissions for vehicles. For natural sources, we rely on Maricopa County and Pinal County for what we call point sources and area sources. These are stationary sources. MAG will be responsible for evaluating the reasonably available control measures that are out there. So what we do in that process is we take a look at what's available. This is something EPA requires us to do. And then we provide those measures to the counties for them to evaluate to decide if they need to be implemented or not. We're responsible for showing that whatever measures are adopted can bring us into attainment. So we have to do modeling, whether that's photochemical modeling or dispersion modeling. And so those are the major activities that we do. We bring all of this process through our air committee. We provide regular updates to our folks on our air committee, much more technical in detail process along the way. And we really strive to work hand in hand with the counties and also ADEQ as we move forward with these plans.
Any questions? Mayor Weiss.
Mr. Chair. 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting, West Valley mayors and managers, MAG was there, and there was a discussion on getting involved with EPA, having those discussions from a city basis with EPA, instead of just kind of having MAG take the lead. I know, Audrey, you were there. What role do cities play in engaging the EPA on this along with ozone? And is that engagement effective? A lot of us are going to DC next week. for NLCA. Should we try and engage with the EPA? And I know it takes longer than a week to get meetings, but what should be our role in this?
Question.
Yeah.
I would just say, just as also as a broader context, this rule implementation has created a lot of energy, particularly in the business community nationally. It's a national rule. It is, and particularly I think the National Association of Manufacturers, possibly the National Chamber of Commerce, but I'm more familiar with NAM, has really taken a hard position in coming back to the EPA that the standard is too costly to manufacturing and industry. And they're having that engagement. They engaged in the comment period, and now they're engaging afterwards. And there's different talks about lawsuits or whatever, which is of course their right to do. But this rule has caused a lot of dialogue. And I think maybe Matt talk a bit about the challenge with it is the national air quality standards do not, by a Supreme Court decision, do not take into account cost. Maybe talk about that a bit, Matt, and then we can talk more about how the cities engage in MAG. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the Regional Council. Yeah. To Ed's point, certainly cost is not a consideration when EPA sets these standards. That's been upheld by the courts for quite a while. So that makes it difficult to comment a lot of times on implementation issues, which is what we're largely focused on. Once those standards come into place, we don't have doctors and epidemiologists on our staff, so it's difficult for us to comment on the level of the standard. We are in a period now where, now that the standard is set, it makes more sense for us to comment on how those standards are being implemented, working with EPA on that issue. But to your question, Mayor, I would say that I can speak from my experience that we have found that when cities have engaged or mayors have engaged, it's helpful. It shows EPA that it's an issue that's on their radar and they're very concerned about it. I know that's been my experience when we went through the PM10 process. We had some mayors go to Washington to explain to EPA the struggles we were having. I think that was very helpful. I think in Ozone, we were able to have that meeting with Mayor Gallego and Chairman Hickman from Maricopa County with the EPA. That has resulted as part of the reason why we believe Mr. Goffman is going to come and visit our region. So I think local voices can be very helpful in this process. It probably isn't helpful in changing their mind on what the standard is, but in trying to work with us, provide us flexibility. If you want us to work within the system, work with us, help us, give us tools that make us flexible so we can try and meet these goals.
And I think another, it's a great description. And just to round it out, they can't consider cost by the law. It has to be considered health. It's a health standard, not a cost standard, which seems really strange, right? But the courts have actually upheld that an argument that it's going to cost us too much to comply doesn't carry water in the courts, because the law is about the health-based standard, what's healthy. But to Matt's point, where the engagement comes from the mayors and the supervisors is one, they listen to elected officials more than they listen. I mean, Audra, Matt, and I think we're pretty cool, but you know, when a mayor shows up or a supervisor or chairman, they pay attention. But I think another message for us here in Arizona is it's a national standard that applies to everybody the same. However, understand your flexibility in understanding the differences in geography of the West and the desert is really important as you have flexibility in timelines and implementation and in rulemaking. So just them hearing from you about the impacts to you and the need for flexibility and the need to understand Arizona is not Connecticut is really helpful.
It was interesting. Mayor Hartke had talked about kind of the CHIPS Act. Do you want to touch on that? Because I thought that was a great point.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that next, but I can do that. Is, you know, on one hand, we have the federal government has been pumping billions of dollars into our community, and with TSMC and Intel and companies all around to make this the most profound and powerful advanced manufacturing node in the entire world right now. And on the other hand, another section of government is saying, well, no, you can't do all that manufacturing because of ozone or this particular thing. So we really have two areas and arms of the federal government that are not at the same table with one another. And we can't do what we are charged to do, I think, as cities and as what the nation wants, which is to onshore all of these companies that create safety items for us and for the world, so that our supply chain is not dependent on foreign countries. We cannot do that, and at the same time have these companies their hands tied with EPA requirements, whether it is ozone or this, where the government and feds are not listening to each other. And I don't know what we can do to bring that conversation up. I know we're going to be talking about that in NLC, and I hope every mayor should, but we really are in an awkward spot where we're seemingly the test case for two separate arms of government, both conflicting. It's like mom and dad not agreeing, and the kids are the ones that are hearing conflicting messages here.
Mayor Harkey, I think you just gave everybody one of their speaking points in those meetings that Mayor Weiss talked about. That's exactly the kind of information that is most effective coming from our elected officials. That's one of the things we've been saying as well, but when they hear it from you, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So I did have another question, and maybe it's just to help my understanding. If you could flip back to the actual testing stations. So these in particular, I would somewhat guess that this is the Pinal County, the other was that are these are what almost appear to be more agricultural areas. So it's disturbance of dust farming. I see the East Valley is not necessarily, but South Phoenix below the river, and either disturbing of dust because of all the great construction going on, or farming. And again, that puts us in an awkward position, and Pinal County seemingly even more, where they rely on farming. And another cross message where I'm not sure what we can do, but if any of these sensors are out of compliance, does that mean the entire region is? Is it there's not some sense of okay, we have one out, so therefore we can work on it, but that doesn't describe us? How does that work?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair. So to get to your initial question, what's going to be very important for us is to develop that detailed emission inventory to really highlight what are the sources that are causing the high concentrations. I can just say initially that part of the issue, weather plays a really huge factor, and topography. And so the location of these monitors and kind of the lower lying, that kind of Salt River Basin, is also, the particles tend to settle there as well. But you're right. I think what's interesting about these graphics is the range in values. So that does indicate to us, at least initially, that local sources probably have more of an impact than regional sources, right? If all the monitors were showing the values, we would anticipate it to be more of a regional, maybe even more of a transport issue. But when you do have kind of different values, that does kind of highlight that maybe local sources are involved. The areas in Southwest Phoenix do have more disturbable soils. So I do think that is one possibility, that any activity that disturbs the soils could be more likely to contribute down there than they would in the more developed areas. But again, that's one thing the emissions inventory will help us understand. Another thing that we can do is what's known as chemical speciation, where you actually take a filtered measurement of the PM 2.5, run that through a chemical analyzer, and that can more clearly tell you the source. Because otherwise you just know that it's a particle, but that can tell you this is from a vehicle, this is from a fire, this is from disturbing of the soil. So if we can have more of that data, that can help us. In terms of your last question about non-attainment areas, yeah, if you have one monitor, that still puts the region out of compliance. However, the state is going to have, and this is going to be an important process that we should probably watch very closely and comment on as necessary. How big do you make that non-attainment area? Do you just draw a tight circle around those 3 monitors? Do you expand it larger? Those are the type of questions that are going to be discussed now in this year to come. So even though one monitor gets you out of violation. The size of the non-attainment area can depend on the other values, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any additional? Mayor Wires?
A couple questions. When do the violations seem to be most frequently? Is that in the wintertime during the inversion?
That's correct. So the fall season and the what we call the winter season. For example, at West Phoenix in 2022, they track the quarters. The January through March had an average value of 11, whereas October, November, December had an average value of 16. The spring was 7 and the summer was 5. So we definitely see the highest values in the fall and in the winter. And a lot of that is due just also to the lower inversion layer, as along with the residential wood burning and other activities that occur.
Anybody that's ever flown private aircraft in the wintertime can tell you very quickly that not only that inversion level, that it goes from warm to cold to warm again, but the fact that the particulates that actually hold in the air, I mean, it's a big difference. I was a little surprised that the numbers are higher in the wintertime, only because we have so many dust devils during the summertime, which just that dust devil alone, a large one, can really create a lot of issues with dirt. So I don't know. I think it's probably going to be a lot higher issue with vehicle emissions than it is going to be with soil being disrupted, things like that, just because of the inversion level, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair and Mayor. Yeah, again, I think we do need that more detailed inventory to really answer your question. But yeah, certainly vehicle exhaust is going to be a component of the inventory.
And just to emphasize that, we do have the resources, and Matt's team has the expertise to do that, so we can tell you specifically to that question. Is it the dust devils? Is it emissions? What is it? We need to get that data. Fortunately, the timeline is extended here where we have the time to do that, and our commitment is that we will get that.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Item number 8, SunCloud Data Portal. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. It will be presented by Ted Brown, Transportation Planning and Performance Program Manager. We look forward to your TED Talk.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Hartke, members of the Regional Council. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the SunCloud. I'll take you through what it is, some of our more innovative data layers, and then we'll end with a very quick demonstration of the tool itself. So what is the SunCloud? The SunCloud is a title of an Accelerated Innovation Deployment Grant that was awarded in 2017. ADOT, MAG, SCMPO, SVMPO, and a number of other partners were awarded $1 million to develop a data portal to increase the usability, accessibility, and quality of transportation data and analysis tools in the Sun Corridor.
Okay, Ted, what's SCMPO and what's SVMPO?
Sun Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Which is where?
Which is in Casa Grande, and then Sierra Vista, which is down in Cochise County. So the goal of the project overall was to better understand the needs of the corridor and help align strategies and policies of investments. But one side benefit that we continue to hear, particularly from our rural partners, is what a benefit it is to have 22 high-quality data sets available for their region. Speaking of that region, our study area for this effort was a 5-county area in southeastern Arizona that included Maricopa, Pima, Pinal, Cochise, and Santa Cruz counties. It's about 30,000 square miles of land and about 85% of the state's population. We needed many hands to make light work, and so we started a coalition, a robust team of stakeholders that included all of the COGs and MPOs in the area, and of course our federal partners at FHWA and our state partners at ADOT. Over the next 5 years, MAG led the team that developed and implemented the SunCloud data portal. So I want to touch on some of the data layers we have. We have 22 distinct data layers in this tool. I obviously can't touch on all of them, but this being an accelerated innovation deployment grant, we had to do some innovating. So I'm going to talk about 3 that we think really help move the needle forward. The first up is safety. And so we've applied methodology from the Highway Safety Manual to help identify areas where opportunities exist to implement impactful safety solutions. To do that, we've had to combine our safety data from ADOT with our modeled AADTs, as well as the latest safety performance functions. The ability to evaluate projects on something other than just crash rate or total crashes is a step forward. The ability to do something on a predictive methodology is a huge leap forward. The next up is our disadvantaged facility users layer. Before this tool, all of our equity scores were based on proximity. So if you were near a disadvantaged community, you would get the points. That's not always necessarily the best methodology, as it doesn't take into account who's actually using that roadway. And so we partnered with a company called Replica to run what's essentially a select link analysis for the entire area. And what that means is we got a report that contained not only the number of users of that roadway, but also the home location of those users. By combining that data with our disadvantaged community data, we can develop a percentage of roadway users that have a home location in a disadvantaged community. That's a monumental step forward in how we score equity. And I want to give you a quick example of how this can improve our methodology. What we see on the screen here is a small piece of South Extension Road. That section itself does not check any of our disadvantaged community boxes. However, you can see all of the blocks around it do. In our previous methodology, that particular section would not have received an equity score. Using our new methodology, we can show that 70% of the roadway users of that particular segment have a home location in a disadvantaged community.
And just to be clear, Ted, so an equity score would be something that the federal government would require to be used in deploying federal funds for projects.
That's correct. Next up, we have pavement condition. So a few years ago, MAG went through an extensive exercise where we reached out to all 27 cities and towns and our 3 native nations and asked for their pavement condition so we could put together an arterial pavement condition layer. Frankly, that effort was a lot of work. We recognized that we had 7 different pavement methodologies across our region. All of that data needed to be crosswalked so it could play together nicely. It was collected at different times. However, we did manage to wrench that into some kind of synergy, and we tried to take that same methodology for the Sun Cloud, but quickly realized that was a bit of a fool's errand for such a large area. So instead, we reached out for a third-party data solution. We contacted Neurodynamics for that data solution. And that data set they provided has a ton of advantages for us. Namely, it's all collected uniformly in the same way across the entire 5-county area. Any roadway that is functionally classified as an arterial or above now has a pavement condition. That's fantastic news for some of our smaller partners who may not have access or regular access to a LiDAR van or a pavement truck. Secondarily, it provides extremely recent data. So all of the data in this layer is from the last 12 months. I think there's more layers of interest here, but we need to move on. So what can you actually do with the Sun Cloud? We designed this for maximum utility, but also flexibility. And we had a few very specific goals in mind. The first being we wanted to symbolize multiple attributes. And by that, I don't mean just switching between layers, but switching what's displayed on the map within a single layer. We also wanted the ability to filter by attribute, meaning, hey, I only want to see roadways that have 50 crashes or more, or by geography, meaning I only want to see my city, my MPO, or my county. And then we wanted you to be able to get that data out of the platform, whether that be through a PDF map or exporting the data itself so you could continue your analysis in any software you choose. Throughout the project, we had this kind of motto of different strokes for different folks. And so while we've provided some weighting schemes based on nationwide best practices and professional judgment, we recognized with a dozen agencies involved in the project and covering the land area of dozens of additional agencies, we weren't going to land on one set of weights that was going to make everybody happy. So instead, we built a custom scoring widget where you can set your own weights in the browser on the fly and rescore the entire area immediately. If you don't think bridges are very important, you can set those to 0, rerun it. If you think reliability is extra important, you can crank that up, and away you go with a bespoke set of weights that matches your needs or values. And with that, we're going to switch to a quick demonstration. I was talked out of a live demonstration, so I have a video for you. And I think I'm just going to orient you here first. This is what you get when you land on the Sun Cloud. So it's obviously very map-driven, heavy focus. On your left here, you'll see all of the additional data layers we have in the tool. And we've started the video here. I'm going to switch it from pavement condition over to safety. Then I'm going to switch the symbolization from excess expected crashes over to bicycle and pedestrian fatal and severe injuries. switch over to our filters tab and I'll select what type of geography I want to look for. I'm going to pick cities and then I'm going to pick Chandler as our city of interest. When I do that, it's immediately going to zoom into the city of Chandler and cut off all the extraneous information outside of their boundaries. From here, I can go over and I could print that map so I can include it in an email or a report. I can also click on a tabular view so that I can see all the data underlying this information. From there, I can also export that data if I so choose. I can also click on the map itself and click on any segment within this area to get additional pop-up information. This being the safety layer, you'll see things like the number of crashes, pedestrian crashes, level of safety service, so on and so forth. The last thing we'll show in this video is just one of those creature comforts, how you can change the base map to help better show whatever attribute you're trying to display. I also wanted to leave you with a bit of a use case. And so this tool does a lot of things well. I think one of the things it does best is highlighting or finding areas of needs or interests. And so let's for a moment pretend there's a notice of funding opportunity or a NOFO coming down from the feds that's heavily focused on quantitative data. And they want to see some very specific things in your applications. So in this example, oops, there we go. You moving? Tyler, can you hit play on that one? Thank you. I'm going to flip over to the scoring tab here, and I'm going to change those sliders. And let's say they're very interested in this hypothetical NOFO in bicycle and pedestrian fatalities, pavement condition, and reliability. I've changed those sliders. It automatically adjusts all the other ones, and I've hit rescore. In just a couple of seconds, you'll see this flash, and all of the new scores will be displayed based on the weights that I have selected at input. This is a fantastic tool to develop those discretionary grant applications. From here, you can export that entire layer to continue your analysis. You could export just the sections you're interested in. We also have this nice show hide button, so you can see exactly how that's changed from the base weighting. I have some useful links for you. These are also in your agenda packet. We have our main site. We have an information site. We also have a training video. We spent 75 minutes with all the project partners clicking through every single button on that so you can understand exactly how it works and what it does. And if you're extra nerdy like me and would like some extra credit, we have the entire code repository hosted on a Bitbucket. You can fork that repository, take pieces of the code that you like, leave the ones you don't, have your very own SunCloud. And before I wrap up, I would just like to address the number one question I get asked when I give this presentation, which is, do you have a plan to update and maintain it? And the short answer is not presently. The longer answer is the data in this platform is going to be good for a couple of years. Something like bridge condition isn't going to change dramatically in a year-over-year basis. However, there are some very useful layers that do have a shelf life. So we're constantly looking for grant opportunities or funding to upkeep and maintain this platform. We recently identified a federal grant that we think would fit well, and we've already submitted an application for that. However, this is a fantastic time to be hearing about the SunCloud, as we think the data in here is good for probably another 8 to 12 months before we really need to dig in and start updating some of those layers. Vice Chair Hartke, that completes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Very insightful. Questions?
Wow.
So where your staff, you have questions as a policymaker about, as Ted said, what's going on with bicycle crashes in our community, or what does our pavement condition look like? There's a place, and it comes from the work that Ted and his team have done.
Well done. Well done.
That was the best TED Talk I've heard in a long time.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair.
All right. Hearing no other questions. Thank you, sir. I look forward to digging into that. Next is our Executive Director's report. Mr. Zerker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very quickly, you mentioned it at the beginning, but we do want to welcome President Sandra Patea from the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. As she mentioned, she's in her third week. We had some ag staff at her inauguration. There she is on the left as she's sworn in. So welcome, and we're looking forward to working with the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation under her direction. Next, the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center highlighted some work that you all have sponsored here, MAG Age Friendly Arizona. Last year, MAG hosted a statewide summit with 150 participants from all around Arizona to talk about the toolkit and how it's used in coordinating plans that affect human service transportation. And that is now being shared as a national model. And it was presented earlier this month at the Southwest Transit Association Conference in Oklahoma. And Kelly Williams and Amy St. Peter are the contacts for that, as your communities might have human services transportation needs. Next, the Continuum of Care, which is housed here at MAG, although it has its own separate governance. But we're really excited that, and this is good news for all of you who are concerned with homelessness and the work in that, is that HUD in fiscal year 2023, through that, in response to that, the Maricopa Region Continuum of Care will get an additional $10 million over its current funding level. So the Continuum of Care will receive a total of $46.5 million to support 26 housing programs, 2 coordinated entry projects, the computer system, and funding for planning. So our staff, Brian Gruters, can speak more to that, but it's good news for the region that has come about from something housed here at MAG. The next is congratulations, and just to recognize the work done by Mayor Walter in the town of Florence. We are celebrating the beginning of construction of a MAG-funded project in Florence. As illustrated here, it is at the intersection of State Route 287, State Route 79B, using 2 roundabouts with lighting, sidewalk, pathway improvements, new curb gutter, stormwater, and reconstructing local streets and driveways. It was awarded through MAG's Pinal County Arterial Bridge Program, more than $8.5 million in federal funding, and it's being constructed by ADOT in cooperation with the town of Florence. So that's good news for our member, the town of Florence there. And then finally, I would just mention, as we kind of alluded to in this, next week, basically the top air quality administrator in the United States from the Environmental Protection Agency, a gentleman named Joe Goffman, is coming to the region. There was initially a request made by Chair Gallego and Maricopa County Chairman Hickman at the time in a meeting they had with him on all of our behalf. They asked him if he would come out here. Well, it took a couple of U.S. senators to be a little more persuasive to drive that home. And so now here in March, Administrator Goffman is coming to the region. He's going to be meeting on the ground with industry and with the state. And I believe Chair Gallego is going to have a meeting with him again to, sort of Mayor Weiss's point, drive home from a local perspective the issues related to ozone regulation, PM 2.5 regulation, but specifically focusing on ozone and its impact here. We're just pleased that he's going to actually see the story, Mayor Harkey, that you mentioned, which is the engine. And what we call it is don't sanction the solution. That's sort of the tagline we've given it, which is the solution to the nation's defense, chips, clean energy, battery storage, electric vehicle work is happening here in Maricopa County and Pinal County. Your rules, on the other hand, are sanctioning them, perhaps. Let's work together and figure out a way that doesn't happen. And so that's happening next week. I just wanted to update you on that. So thank you, Mayor Harkey.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. Next, legislative update. Roger Quester.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of Regional Council. Just want to report that we continue to monitor several transportation, housing, and environmental quality bills. Notably, we continue to track the Arizona Department of Transportation continuation. While a clean 8-year extension of ADOT was successfully passed out of House Committee, it's House Bill 2037, Senate Bill 1184 was passed out of the Senate Transportation Technology and Missing Children's Committee with only a 2-year extension. Further, several amendments were offered to this bill, including many policies MAG has been successful in preventing be added to enabling legislation over the last couple of years. These amendments include prohibiting the reduction of existing lane miles on state highways, regardless of safety, engineering, or operational needs, preventing ADOT from considering ways to reduce vehicle miles traveled, prohibiting ADOT from building or maintaining public charging infrastructure, thus risking federal funding and our share of it coming to this state, banning pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists from using any part of access controlled highways, prohibiting considerations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or developing a carbon reduction plan, further risking Arizona's fair share of federal funding, and preventing potential expansion of intercity rail, including Amtrak between the cities of Phoenix and Tucson. Neither of these bills has moved out of either of their chambers, potentially alluding to an item that will be discussed as part of budget negotiations. MAG does support a clean continuation, not free of new policy provisions that contain or constrain, the work either of the department or, more importantly, the implementation of MAG's investment plan, and we will continue to do work to that end. I just want to note just a couple of other air quality bills, particularly related to the conversations as Matt Poppin had just highlighted earlier. We're tracking several vehicle miles traveled bills and continuing resolutions and fuel standard options that potentially could constrain our state implementation plan and related air quality requirements, including the travel reduction program. We're tracking a fireworks bill, notable given the PM 2.5 presentation you specifically heard today. I'll remind you that on New Year's, as Matt reported, the PM 2.5 readings were over 20 times that of what the standard is. And so obviously we're tracking that bill. Many of your cities have already signed in opposition, as well as fuel blend bills. With that, Mr. Vice Chair, that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Audra. Questions? Mr. Weiss.
There was a comment made at the legislature on intercity, well, the Amtrak between Phoenix, basically Buckeye and Tucson. And the comment was that we shouldn't invest in trains, which are 100-year-old technologies, but continue to invest in cars, which are 100-year-old technologies. So I think there's a hypocrisy there. For Avondale, we are hoping that Amtrak goes through with their plans. We've been in discussions with Amtrak since Mayor Lord was involved with those conversations, and we've already had discussions with the city of Towson about combining on a train station. So Amtrak, I think, is important to the region. I think it's important for tourism, and I think it helps to connect Tucson and Phoenix, which is great for business and great for trade. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Even though,
Additional questions or comments? Yeah, Mr. Brazil.
At some point, as the electric cars become more prevalent, I'm wondering if the trust down at the state legislature has figured out how they're going to fund roads. Just curious.
No, don't ask questions you want.
Vice Chair Harkey, members of Regional Council, Mayor Pizzillo. That's particularly one of the reasons we're tracking some of these vehicle mile travels bills, recognizing that one of your adopted policy principles is support of modernization of the Highway User Revenue Fund, which year over year brings in less when adjusted for inflation, although we're utilizing, as you've recognized, Mayor, our infrastructure much more every single day. And so that's why we're continuing to monitor these bills in recognition that there's significant potential implications associated to the future.
All right. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is requests for future agenda items. Are there any? Next, comments from the committee. I would just like to invite you all, if we call it, for years we've had an East Valley Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. If we change the range to east of Quartzsite, you are all welcome to join us. It'll be April 16th, Salt River Pima. President Javier is hosting this year. And if you're interested, you can look up 2024 East Valley Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. Any additional comments? Seeing none, like to adjourn our meeting.